Many, many, many people today are becoming aware of something that is really quite remarkable, because it's a shift in the fundamental way that many of us have been thinking. What the discovery is that each moment, each of us, whether or not we're aware of it, gives priority to whatever is the unique best thing for us to do for the common good of us all. About this, we don't have a choice. This is nature. And we can look at our every moment experience and notice that this is true. We've been brought up in a world, most of us, that assumes that competition is fundamental in nature, and that by nature I give priority to the self-interest of my physical body. It turns out that is not true.
Hi, I'm Monique Gauthier, and today we're here with Terry Mollner, one of the pioneers of socially responsible business and investing. In 1982, he was one of the founders of the Calvert Funds. It's the first family of socially responsible investment funds. Today, the Calvert Group has $12 billion under management and is the largest family of such funds. Terry is also the chair of Stakeholders Capital, a socially responsible asset management firm. So hi, Terry. Terry has also recently published 2 books. This is The Love Skill. We are each mastering the 7 layers of human maturity. And then also a brief introduction to the Common Good movement. And so today we're going to talk about the Common Good movement and find out what that's about. So hi, Terry.
Hi, Monique.
So tell us, the Common Good movement, what does that mean?
Like many, many, many others around us, I've become aware of something that I wasn't aware of before. And that is that each moment I naturally give priority to what I think is the most important, unique thing for me to do for the common good of us all. What I've discovered is about that I don't have a choice. And that's true in my every single experience. Now I know we've all grown up in a world that assumes that by nature I give priority to the self-interest of my physical body.
Yeah.
But what I've discovered is that's not the case. Now let me give an example.
Okay.
Let's say you and I are married and we decide we want to go to a movie. And there's this one movie you really want to go to very badly. And there's another movie that I would like to go to, but our priority is for the two of us to be together. So that we decide easily to go to the movie that you most want to go to because our priority is to be together. We gave priority to the common good. Now let's say that there's an issue with the children. And I say to you, instead of going to a movie tonight, let's go out to dinner and have a conversation about this issue that's happening with one of the kids. We easily decide not to go to the movie and to go out to dinner because it's a more important thing for the good of the whole family to go to have dinner and have the discussion. Now let's say that you happen to be the president of a nation, and there's a meeting at the United Nations tonight, and it's making a decision about ending a world war. We would easily decide to give priority to you going to the movie, to going to the movie, for you going to the United Nations and us not going to the movie or having the discussion over dinner. In each situation, we gravitated toward doing what was best for the common good of us all. And what I've discovered is that is what we naturally do. And many other people have discovered this as well. And so the common good movement is recognizing this is natural for us to do this.
Well, I'm glad we're not going to war. But what I'd like to understand more about is, why is this natural? Why is it natural to make priority be the common good?
Well, in order to understand that, we have to understand that cooperation is fundamental in nature, not competition. Now let me explain about that. If I have an apple, which I happen to have brought along, if I have an apple and you don't care who gets the apple and I don't care who gets the apple and nobody else cares who gets the apple, well then anybody could take the apple and we would all be as happy afterwards as we were before. But let's say that I want to have the apple and you want to have the apple. Now we could compete over seeing who's going to get the apple. The thing that we often don't notice is that for there to be competition, the two of us had to have an agreement that who got the apple was important. Without that contextual cooperative agreement, there'd be no possibility for competition. So competition only exists inside the container of cooperation, and cooperation is always fundamental in nature. Now the birds at my bird feeder outside, my house, they are having a nonverbal agreement about who gets the seeds is important. Now, they don't have the ability of language or self-consciousness. So for them, what's best for the common good of all is the survival of the fittest. And so we've all been aware of that. But in the world of self-consciousness, we are able to identify self with all that is. And so whenever the thing expands, like the movie story, the dinner story, and the United Nations story, we always gravitate toward giving priority to what is best for the common good. That is natural. That's what we do.
How is that natural?
Well, the other thing that needs to be understood is that cooperation is when all the parts give priority to the whole. Let's take a look at our bodies. My lungs, my liver, my kidneys, my toenail, they're all cooperating for the good of what I consider to be my whole body. They're not competing with each other. So we all recognize that cooperation is the fundamental activity inside our skins. But we also think that we're in competition with everything outside our skins. It turns out that life is not a contradiction. Cooperation is fundamental everywhere, as I just explained in the example about the movies. So if cooperation is fundamental everywhere, and all the parts give priority to the good of the whole, then the universe has to be one indivisible whole. That has to be the conclusion. And so each of us have to realize that our accurate self-definition really is, I'm first the universe, and secondly this physical body. Only I control the free choices of this individual body, and only I can mature myself from the inside. I can't mature you from the inside. I can only mature myself from the inside. So that sense of individual responsibility is not negated by this at all. It's reinforced. And so that is the nature of cooperation, is to give priority to the common good of all. And cooperation is fundamental in nature, and cooperation is when a part gives priority to a whole.
As I'm listening to, I'm thinking that, but competition is what we've been brought up to think is the natural response to what's going on in life.
Yeah. And that is the result of learning a language. When each of us were a little child and we were learning a language, we took on the assumption of language to be the assumption about reality. A spoon, the word spoon is not a spoon. It is a sound and a symbol that represents a spoon. So the word spoon is really an illusion. There's 6,000 languages on Earth. Each of them is a mutually agreed upon illusion of a group of people. To say the word spoon will mean spoon, will represent a spoon. But all those languages are illusions. They're illusions because they need to be able to point to a particular thing or to the entire universe, using a word. So what is important to understand is that the fundamental assumption of language, which we all take on when we learn a language, is that the universe is an immense number of different and separate parts. The parts are different, but they're not separate. But we all take that on when we take on the assumption of language. We all take on when we learn our first language.
So how do we escape illusion?
Well, the only way we can do that is to recognize that there are stages of maturity of being a human being. We each come in the world as a baby, and as a baby we do not have the abilities of language, of self-consciousness, of exercising free will. We don't have any of those skills. We learn them one by one in each stage of maturity, and each stage builds on the one before it. So we come in as a baby, we then become a toddler where we learn differences in feelings, feeling good or not feeling good. And then we learn a language where we learn about time and space and the parts and all of that. And then we become a teenager where we discover that, wait a minute, I don't have to live inside your multiple choice questions. I could live inside my multiple choice questions. I can make up the multiple choice questions. So if you ask me if I want strawberry, chocolate, or vanilla ice cream, I might respond and say, I don't want to talk about ice cream right now. I want to talk about getting a car. So that's individual freedom. Now I get to make the choices. The next stage, the adult stage, is when we realize the most important free choice is our fundamental assumption about reality. Because whatever we assume is our fundamental belief system, everything else yields to that. All our other beliefs have to be in alignment with that. So our most important free choice is our fundamental belief. And as we know in the world that we live in today, beliefs are all over the place. The next stage of maturity is what I call the elder stage. And that's where we discover the accurate fundamental assumption about reality. And there is an accurate fundamental assumption about reality. And that accurate fundamental assumption is that the universe is an indivisible whole. Remember the other three things. Cooperation is fundamental in nature. Cooperation is when the parts give priority to the whole. Therefore, there's only one indivisible whole, the universe. So when we discover the accurate fundamental assumption, we then think we've figured it all out. We think maybe we should have a guru chair or something. But then we discover that we're still giving our power to a second thing that doesn't exist, called a belief. Even if it's the accurate belief, it's still a belief. It's still a bunch of words. We then discover the highest stage of maturity of self-consciousness, which is giving priority to the experience of the oneness of nature. There is no beginning, there is no end, there is no edge to experience. The experience that you and I are having right now, there's no end to it, there's no edge to it, there's no beginning of it. It's a constant presence of experience. So once we understand that, we then realize that when we discover the highest stage of maturity, that we always give priority to our experience of the oneness of nature, at that point, we then understand that the universe is one indivisible whole and everything else that I've just said. And so now we self-consciously choose to give priority to the common good of all, rather than to have it be happening unconsciously. It's been happening unconsciously all along, because the universe is an indivisible whole. But now we become the masters of doing it self-consciously. And that's the skill of being a mature human being.
So given your dissecting where we're at.
Layers of maturity.
Right. Where is the United States and its culture as far as our maturation?
In 1776, the United States was the first nation to establish democracy based on individual freedom. And it's the only one that's been sustained. Today, 2/3 of the nations on the planet are democracies. So the entire planet has been emerging into the teenage stage of maturity. And we're in that transition to the teenage stage of maturity, which is the recognition of individual freedom and the recognition of democracy as the way to go about making decisions. The next stage of maturity is the adult stage. Well, we're familiar with that all day long because we watch television and there's all these different beliefs all over the place. Democrats, Republicans, Christianity, science, transpersonal psychology, whatever it is. So what's happening now is we're in transition to the next stage of human maturity, which is the elder stage, where we reach agreement that the accurate fundamental assumption is that the universe is one indivisible whole. So now if you take a look at our economy, you'd say, well, what do we have as an economy here? Well, it's an economy that's set on a group of cooperative rules, can't lie and steal, kill, but we focus on the competition. Now, in 1981, Jack Welch, who was then the CEO of General Electric, he made a comment at an annual meeting of General Electric Board of Directors. And what he said is, if you're not number 1 or number 2 in your product area, get out of it. What was he saying? He was saying is, a monopoly is illegal according to our cooperative rules, but a duopoly is legal. So what's been the major focus of all the multinational corporations, at least since then, is to become number 1 or number 2 in your product area, because then you have a duopoly kind of monopoly. So for instance, the ones that we're all familiar with is Lowe's, Home Depot, Verizon, AT&T, CVS, Walgreens, Hershey's, Mars, Coors, Miller's. Anheuser-Busch, Miller's. There's many, many of them, but those are the ones that we were most visible. Well, what's going to happen when the public becomes aware that what's really going on is the duopolization of our economy? And what happens when they also become aware that by nature our highest priority is the common good, not our self-interest of our bodies, and therefore cooperation is what's fundamental in nature. Well, what's going to happen at that point is the public's going to say, excuse me, we think that you should, if you're going to be basically cooperating, you duopolies, you should be cooperating for the common good rather than a few shareholders. So that's going to mean that we're going to make a change into this transition economically into this next stage of maturity of this, what I call the elder layer, where we recognize that cooperation is fundamental, and that then what will happen is something really that we can't even easily imagine at this point. Those duopolies will realize that the only way they can stay ahead of the game is they're going to have to get together and freely choose to agree to raise the level, labor, environment, and social playing field by reaching an agreements to raise that while continuing to compete as a secondary activity. So for instance, I'm on the board of Ben & Jerry's. Ben & Jerry's and Haagen-Dazs, we control 86% of the super premium ice cream market in the United States. And we're expanding into the same 30 nations around the world. And we know that we're going to be number 1 or number 2 super premium ice cream on the planet, because Haagen-Dazs is owned by Nestle's, which is number 2 consumer products on the planet, and Ben & Jerry's is now owned by Unilever, which is the number 3. So we know we'll be number 1 and number 2 on the planet. So what will happen is duopolies will get together, such as Ben & Jerry's and Haagen-Dazs could get together and say, listen, let's agree that our minimum wage, any place that our 2 ice creams are produced, is going to be the livable wage for the area. That would not cost either one of our companies a penny, because relative to one another, the rise in the cost stays the same. Yet it's a magnificent thing for those communities and for the common good of all, and the public will sure love Unilever and Nestle's for doing it. So what I firmly believe will be happening very soon is there'll be much more cooperation than there is now between these duopolies, triopolies, et cetera, because it's the only way to maintain their duopoly positions in the respect of the public.
Okay, so give more examples so we can really understand how this would play out.
Okay. One of the main things I think is going to be happening is that people are going to understand that there are these stages of maturity of being a human being, and they're going to say, whoa, I want to make sure that my kids are eldered all the way up to the highest stage of maturity before they leave my house, before they're 20 years old, before they begin to think about getting married. So the first thing that's going to happen is people are going to re-village their lives in a modern context. They're going to come together as a group to be able to help each other mature themselves up those stages of maturity and to be sure to elder their children. The other thing that's going to happen is there's going to be the emergence of a cooperative democracy. Right now what we have is a majoritarian democracy. So what's going to happen is that alongside every majoritarian democracy, there's going to be the emergence as a nonprofit organization of a cooperative democracy. Respected representatives from each one of the for-profit and nonprofit major organizations in the area will be on the common good cooperative democracy board of directors or whatever. They will then take any issue into consideration that's important to the community, and they'll reach some agreement on it. Maybe the first year they discuss it, such as a woman's right to an abortion, or should we have a progressive in tax, and how progressive, how steep should it be? They might reach an agreement on one of those 2 things that 51% said we should do one of those 2 things. The next year they debated it should be 62%. Next year it's 76%. Once it's more than 75%, they probably won't discuss it anymore. But that'll be the way that the community will reach agreement on what we might call policy decisions. This group, if it maintains its respectability and does a good job, it'll become the most respected group in the community without any legal power. Nobody will be able to run for office if they don't support the things that have received a 75% vote. So now there's a process of debating these fundamental issues in the community without any paternalism. Nobody's forced to go along with it, but everybody will. So therefore, it'll be a loving process. Another thing that's going to happen, I'm sure, and it's already starting to happen, it's started to happen in England, we will create an organization in the private sector that'll create a trust fund for every baby born into any group. So a church group or a corporation or a township could say, anytime a baby's born into our group, we're going to create an $11,000 trust fund for that child. And then the trust fund will operate in such a way that where every year some of the net profits are loaned to create a trust fund for other children, particularly poor children around the world, so that you know that eventually every single child on this planet will have a trust fund. The vision will even be more important than the accumulation of the money. But it's all a matter of how many people join to do it, for how rapidly every child on the planet has a trust fund to keep them above poverty, which is great for business. Those are called customers in the world of business. The last thing I'll point out is there'll be the emergence of a new kind of nation state. It'll be a nation based on agreement rather than geography. Right now, all our nations are defined by geography. It's not too easy for me to not be an American citizen anymore. But if I join a nation by agreement, it's just like the Sierra Club. Anybody could join or leave at any time. I don't have to move. So now there could be a nation by agreement that anybody on the planet could join or leave at any time. This kind of nation will only focus on giving priority to the common good of all, not its members, to the common good of us all. This would be a common good nation state. And it will only attend to things that are not being done well by the current nation state, locally, or not being done at all. And so the current nation states will love it because it'll only be doing things that they're not doing yet or they haven't done well enough yet. So they'll be loved, so they'll be encouraged. So those are some of the kind of new systems I think will be being created as we move into this next phase.
Wow, Terry. It's quite the vision. It's quite optimistic. I like it.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if somebody wants to learn about this, obviously the place to go is to our website. They can go to www.commongoodmovement.com, and they can learn a lot more. They can read both of those two books you pointed out, free on the website. There won't be, there's no charge for them, but they could also buy them if they wanted to. But let me say this in conclusion, that maturation is the kind of cooperation that is fundamental in nature. We're obviously going someplace, but we're not going someplace in time. We're going someplace in maturation. So what's really beautiful is that this is a natural process. We know we will eventually get there, where we'll all be cooperating at a high level of maturity. And then, just like an apple tree has all the blossoms come out at the same time all over the tree, these kind of organizations will be emerging at the same time everywhere.
I can kind of see that. I can imagine into that. I like
Good,
that.
good.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much, Terry.
You're welcome.